once again. This is Diana Catherine Plopa. I am here with Indie Reads TV from Pages Promotions, and today we have featured author Thomas Galasso, and he's really an exciting author on the scene today. He wrote this awesome book. We're going to talk to you, tell you all about this book, and some really exciting adventures associated with the book as well. Tom, welcome.
Well, thank you for having me here. This is an incredible pleasure.
I'm so glad that you're able to be here with me. First of all, let's show everybody the book. There's your book. It's When the Swan Sings on Hastings. This book takes place in Detroit, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
yes, indeed.
And it's a historical Detroit. Can you tell us a little bit about the time period and give us just a brief synopsis of the book? But I need you to set up the time period so people understand what the story's about.
That's where it's all about. Okay. We're talking about the 1950s in Detroit. Now, there was an area called Paradise Valley. Mm-hmm. It is basically I-75 from Comerica Park, Ford Field, somewhere, all of that up I-75 all the way to basically West Grand Boulevard, or East Grand Boulevard there, I'm sorry. This area was predominantly black. It had a million nightclubs, after-hours joints, bars, black cleaners, restaurants, you name it. At that time, that was the area because it was segregation. That's where the African Americans pretty much were relegated to.
Right.
However, at the same time, because it's this cultural epicenter, there's all these great musicians coming down there, like Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie, John Lee Hooker. That's when the blues started moving in the 50s.
Yeah.
So it was a really jumping, hot place. And then they tore it all down and they built I-75.
What a waste.
And it got swept, I won't say under the rug, it got swept under the tar and cement. At least the rug, you can pick the rug up and look.
That's right, yeah.
But under the tar and cement, you can't. So to me, there's all these lost souls. And when I wrote the novel, I wanted to bring them back to life. And how did this all happen?
Yeah, what made you decide?
Wow.
I mean, this is not your. I'm having a technical issue. Hold on a second here. There we go. This is not your average topic to write about.
Crazy.
And most people don't say, "Oh, I'm going to go dig up I-75 and write about what used to be there." This is really something out of the ordinary. How did you come about waking up one day and saying, you know what, this used to be a vibrant music community. I'm going to write a book about that.
Let's start with Detroit Public Schools. That's where I got the idea to write this. I'm a teacher in Detroit Public Schools. At the time, I taught English and drama. So I said, wow, why don't I just write something for my drama students and we'll perform it?
Yeah.
Because I was at Northern High School and our theater was, physically, it was in a shambles. So I said, we're going to have to do stuff in the choir room or wherever. So I need a really small set. So I thought, why don't I do something on Hastings Street? Because this is historical and blah, blah, blah. However, a year before that, I taught at a middle school, and the teacher next door to me, who is the vocal music instructor, said, okay, we got to do something for Black History Month. Let's write about my dad. And I'm like, who's your dad? And she said, Turkey Stearns. Who's Turkey Stearns? Well, he played for the Detroit Stars, who is the Negro Leagues. He was a Negro League All-Star, and Hamtramck Stadium is where they used to play. So anyways, I did all this research on him. I thought, this is a pretty interesting thing. And then I went, I remember these Hastings stories. When I used to bartend in Greektown long before I was a teacher, there was a club called the Music Menu, and all these older jazz musicians and blues musicians used to come in there and play. Now, Thornetta Davis, who's pretty popular right now, sang there. But there was Alberta Adams, God rest her soul. There was Johnny Bassett. There were some great they were old,
Mm-hmm.
and they used to tell me these stories. I'd go on break, and I was lucky enough to sit at the table, and I started asking them questions.
Oh my gosh, what a
So,
wealth of culture.
Isn't this crazy? So it's almost serendipity or divine order, whatever you want to call it, how this all came together. And then I mixed that with the baseball players. And I thought, well, let's have something a little other than just these guys sitting around a bar going, oh my God, our neighborhood's going to be bulldozed down and made into a freeway. So that's basically how it came together.
That's incredible. So I think it's remarkable that this wasn't something you thought about. It was just something that through divine inspiration fell in your lap and you went, yeah, that's a story. I'll write that.
I think it's the story of my life, how all these things happened.
Yeah.
And then I end up through the publishing, I end up this short film comes out of it, and that's a whole different story.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a couple of minutes.
Story.
But so when you're writing this, and we have to say this is a novel, but it's a historical novel. I mean, it's what in the industry we like to call creative nonfiction. It's nonfiction, but you take stuff to fill in the holes with fiction.
Sure.
Right. So when you're creating this, who was your favorite character to create?
Actually, there's some I didn't really create because they were already there. I just made them mine.
Sure.
The one I love the most that I created was the Shoeshine Kid.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about him.
Well, Clarence is an interesting fellow, and I'm going to stick my neck out and say this because I normally don't like to talk about Clarence because there's this little secret about him. He's autistic.
Okay.
And he's 15 years old. Mm-hmm. Basically, he's has Asperger's syndrome, which is the higher level.
Okay.
I teach kids with autism. I'm certified in it. So it was a student I used to have that there's
he was
some
kind of the
kids you just
inspiration
never
for it?
forget.
Yeah.
You never forget these guys. And I said, that's my Clarence. But he's going to be a hard-working kid up and down Hastings. He's the Shoeshine Kid. And then the record store, the guy who owns the record store, whose real name is Joe Von Battle, who really had a record store. Mm-hmm. His record store is where Aretha Franklin first recorded at 14 years old in the back room because he had a reel-to-reel thing there.
That's cool.
Yeah. So Joe takes Clarence under his wing and helps him out because Joe says, why aren't you in school? And Clarence goes, because they said I'm slow. Well, it's not that you're slow. You have autism, and it's a little different.
Do this different.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's my favorite character.
So let's ask the flip side of that question. Mm-hmm. Who's the character in here you like the least?
Oh, Officer Connors. Yeah.
You say that like.
Officer Connors is like, you can't like him. I mean, but you can. You've got to find, that's the thing about being a writer. You can't just write Snidely Whiplash with his mustache. That's a cartoon. So there has to be some kind of realism in there that makes you say, okay, the guy, whatever, had bad upbringing or something. And in this case, he was brought up from the South. A lot of Detroit policemen at that time were from the South.
Okay.
They were white policemen. And for some reason, the police department hired a whole bunch of guys south of the Mason-Dixon line. Mm. And he's the guy who's kind of the villain in the whole thing. Okay.
So we've already established you had to do a ton of research for this book. You talked to just a bunch of people. Yeah. So does that mean that by nature you're a plotter writer, or are you a pantser writer? Like, So
Character guy.
we talk all the time about who's a plotter, who's a pantser. A plotter being somebody who works through an outline and thinks ahead what they're going to write and how they're going to write it. And a pantser, our good friend Donald Levin, is more of a pantser. He just writes as it happens in his head.
I'm more of a pantser.
Are you? Even with all of the research you did?
Well, this is a kind of a unique thing. It's sort of an anomaly of it all. I'm writing short stories now, and it's not so much that at all. It's more about the characters. The writers that I really am influenced by are more character writers as opposed to plot people, you know. But yeah, there was a plot in here, but the plot was already laid out for me because history laid the plot out.
Sure.
There's a neighborhood that's getting destroyed. They're building a freeway out of it. And the big question is, why are you building the freeway here? Why couldn't you go 3 blocks that way or 3 blocks that way? Why did you have to choose Hastings?
That is a good
Kind of
question.
obvious
Yeah,
why.
yeah.
Well,
I think it's obvious, but so in all your research, what happened to that neighborhood? What happened to all the people that, I mean, they were displaced, right?
Yeah, they
so
were
what,
displaced.
what finally happened
Well,
with that music scene? Did it move to, did
Yes,
it evolve into the
yes,
Motown scene?
Yes. Yes, some of it moved into the Motown scene. A lot of it moved up to the northwest side, which is Linwood, Dexter, and 12th Street.
Okay.
And we know what happened in 1967. So that's what happened. It all moved up there. There was a lot of jazz clubs like the Minor Key. That's the one I can think of. There was the Chessmate, but a lot of it went to the west side. A little bit in the north end. The north end is just the other side of the boulevard, like Woodward and the Boulevard, or Oakland and the Boulevard, a little beyond that. That's called the north end. So there's the Apex Bar, which is still there, at least the building is. I don't know what they do with it. So that whole scene went up there. And when it went to the northwest side, Dexter and Linwood, that's when Yusuf Lateef started playing up there. Miles Davis was playing at the Bluebird Inn, which was on Tireman. So it all shifted west.
So let me ask you, I know you to be, there it goes again. I love technology. So I know you to be an astounding musician in your own right. I've seen you play several times, and
I take that as a compliment.
I'm stunned by your ability to play. Did that, being a musician, did that have a driving force in why you chose this particular story to write, or was this story louder than that musician part of you?
Well, that's a big question. Boy, you're like Terry Gross, man. You can ask some questions, Diana.
I have a curious mind.
Well, yes, it did. Even when you read my short stories, there's music in just about every single one of them.
Yeah, I noticed that.
I don't know why, but it just creeps in there. Music is a very influential factor in my life. And so this for sure, you can't even mention Hastings without mentioning music because it was such a big part. It was cutting edge stuff. The blues were coming in.
But do you think that this would have been a story you would have told had you not been a musician?
Sure.
Were you drawn to it?
Sure.
Just on the face of the story itself?
Okay. Funny you would ask. I wrote this originally as a one-act play for high school kids.
Right.
So it was a whole bunch of stuff I had to cut out of it.
Oh,
I couldn't mention all
sure.
these things like it's in the book. But another one of my big influences, I didn't mention the other one, that's not important, but August Wilson is one of my guys. August Wilson wrote Fences. He's an African-American playwright. He's gone from us now. He wrote Fences. He wrote Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. He wrote Joe Turner's Come and Gone, The Piano Lesson, et cetera, et cetera. And there's music in every single one of his plays. He influenced me a lot. So if I wasn't a musician, I'd still be writing about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So something recently happened. I'm pretty excited for you. I was honored to have been at the Main Art Theater a few nights ago, where I got to see a short film based on your book. That was super fun to see it. I'm so honored that you invited me to be there.
I was honored to have you there. How's that?
Well, thank you.
It was an honor to have everybody there.
It was amazing. What a nice night for you.
It was crazy.
What a great opportunity for you to see your work in another medium.
Yeah.
Are there more, I don't know how much you're allowed to divulge, but are there more conversations about creating either a longer short film or a feature film?
I'll just put it like this. I don't want to jinx anything.
Right.
And like I said, serendipity, divine order, whatever you want to call it. I'm an old Catholic boy. So there's interest in it. And I have to write a script.
Okay.
A screenplay, which I've never done. That's okay. There was once upon a time I never wrote a novel.
That's right.
So there it is.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do my homework and learn how to write this and try to get it right. You can only do the best that you can.
That's right.
And
so
there it is.
Yeah, we're tremendously excited. I really hope that in the next year or 2 years we can see this come out for you. I think that would be great. I know that you wrote a collection of short stories that's going to be in an anthology that we're publishing shortly, and I'm really excited about that.
So am I.
That's coming out very soon. Do you have any other books in the works? Any other novels?
I don't. I don't really have a novel in the works, but I have been working on a memoir that I started last year after I took Don Levin's class. Fabulous writer, fabulous individual, teacher, et cetera, et cetera. I can't say enough about Don Levin.
I agree.
And it kind of triggered some stuff. I don't know if I'm going to keep it as a memoir or if I'll just write it as fiction. But right now I want to continue to, once the screenplay or in between, I'm not a kind of guy that just writes one thing. I can work on 4 different things at the same time. It depends on what day it is.
Right. I'm exactly the same way.
Today I'm not in the mood to deal with the screenplay. Let me write the memoir or whatever. So I'm going to go back to that. I just have to find a little niche in there. That's a funny thing about memoirs. You got to have a little.
It's got to be a little bit of a hook.
There's a hook in there. I already have the hook.
Yeah, a little bit of something.
Me, I already have it.
A little bit of something in there to say, oh yeah, that's what the story I'm going to be telling. Because you don't want to tell your whole story. There's got to be one little piece that's really
I had my arm shot off in the Army, and I learned how to play football with the other arm or something like that.
Right, exactly.
That's kind of what makes it roll.
Exactly. So let me ask you this: how does being an author influence the way that you teach? I know you work with autistic kids, but do you take elements of being a writer and incorporate them into the way that you approach teaching?
Not at this point. Maybe when I had gen ed. No.
Did you do that back in the days when you were teaching English and theater?
Sure.
Did you
do
some
of
of that?
Of course I was.
I know it's got to be a little bit more challenging to do something like that when you're working with special needs children.
Yeah, they're nonverbal, and some of them can't read at all. So it's a lot different.
So, but do you have you ever approached, like when you were teaching English, did you ever approach the idea of storytelling as a teaching tool?
Sure.
Not just, I guess my question is getting lost.
Okay.
Not just, we all know English teachers teach with story. That's kind of, you read a book, you talk about story, that's kind of what they do. I guess what I'm asking is, did you ever teach English from a craft perspective where you used the craft of it to impart the lesson?
Oh, sure. I was fortunate enough. They gave me freedom. at Northern High School, some of my favorite authors are Jack Kerouac, Ernest Hemingway, and John Steinbeck.
Okay.
They gave me the freedom to go off their little curriculum list and say, use what you want to use. I said, okay. So we did The Sun Also Rises one year, but I had to teach World War I because suddenly the kids didn't know anything about it. I said, don't you guys get this in history? They went, no. So, okay. So a couple years later, I taught Jack Kerouac's On the Road. And, they were like going, oh, they're smoking pot in this book? Yeah, they're in Mexico. It's 1948, 49. It was legal down there at the time. And that so I used the craft of writing. I used the critical thinking. I used history to get them to show that all these things were going on once. And if you know On the Road, it's about Kerouac's character, Sal Paradise, is trying to find himself.
Right.
And he never does.
Well, who of us ever does?
And that was the beauty of it, that kids, you might go through your whole life and never find the Holy Grail.
Yeah. No, that's a great lesson to impart.
It's what you did along the way.
Yeah.
So I guess I did.
So I got my thing. There we go. I love technology. Sometimes it works to my benefit, and then sometimes it says, guess what? You're not in charge.
Yeah.
So you wrote this great collection of short stories, which I'm honored to edit, and we're bringing that out shortly. And I know you're going to be really consumed with this screenplay for a while. What other, if you had the time, energy, inclination, what other genres interest you in writing? What else do you think you might want to take on, given that the film project is over? I'm
very much almost like this is an anomaly, the Swan Sings On Hastings. I'm kind of again, going in the vein of a Kerouac or a Hemingway. I almost write autobiography. I just change stuff around. I've done a lot of jobs in my life. I've worked I worked in Detroit Receiving Hospital. I took the dead to the morgue. I took them out of the morgue. I worked on an assembly line. I have all these stories that I sat and witnessed. So, like Hemingway wrote A Farewell to Arms about World War I, I'm writing my thing about my experiences, and I definitely write about teaching. So I think I'm more of a write what I know as opposed to let me create this universe.
Got it.
My mind just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, no, I understand. It makes perfect sense. So there are some pretty common questions, as you know, that we all get as writers all the time. So I have to ask some of them occasionally on this program. And I think this is apropos for you because you teach. So what would be a piece of really solid advice that you would give to a novice writer? What would you recommend above all else?
That's a great question, and I'll come from both ways because I definitely have a long past in the theater. Keep doing it. You're going to stub your toe. You're going to write some crap. It's not going to sound good. Eventually, you're going to get better. It's like sports also, you know. I always used to tell these kids, Michael Jordan just didn't wake up and beat. He's putting in three-pointers from all over the floor. It doesn't work that way. It's the tenacity. It's doing it. Believe in yourself and read or study the masters. If you're a painter, go to the DIA and look at the Van Goghs, look at the Bruegel, who's one of my favorites. Look at them all. What are they doing? What can I do? Read the masters.
Yeah, I talk to so many new writers who tell me that they're afraid to read in the genre they want to write because they're afraid of plagiarism. And I said, no.
No.
The best way for you to become good at what you want to write is to read everybody who writes that. You want to write really spooky, scary horror?
Right.
Read everything Stephen
You're
King's
going
ever
to get
written.
influence. Okay,
Yeah.
let me go to music then. I'm basically a rhythm guitar player. I don't even fool around with leads. So I listen to the little hooks. And a lot of it's like Motown or something. It's got this little funky boom, and you listen to that. Next thing you know, it's getting into your fingers. I'm not imitating them. I'm not plagiarizing these guys. I will even go a step further and say, if you want a period of plagiarizing, do it. Nobody's going to see it but you.
There's that.
Do it.
Yeah.
Then throw it out the window and find your own. That's
Right.
all.
Get it out of your system. Right.
As much as I love Jack Kerouac, I don't want to write like him. He's a rambler, stream of consciousness guy. I couldn't even conceive of it. But I love reading him because he gets to my heart.
Sure.
But to kind of imitate the guy, no.
So, as an author, what's the worst piece of advice you've ever been given? Something somebody told you that just wasn't it.
Write to make them happy. And I didn't, someone once said that to me. Write
Really?
to make them happy. If give them what they want, well, I can't give them what they want. I can only give them what I know.
Right.
I can't give you something you want. And that's where I think sometimes writers who become TV, writers who write for, I feel bad for these guys who write for sitcoms. Every 2 seconds you got to have some,
Gotta have
some
a laugh
canned
track.
laughter.
Yeah,
I know.
yeah.
It's terrible. So
Yeah.
that would be the one that that's the only thing I can think of.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming out.
Thank you.
I'm really pleased that we were
incredible.
able to do this. And,
Me too.
when you get more information coming across on the
Sure.
film that you can share, I'd love to have you back so we can talk
Oh,
about
we'll
it.
do it for sure.
And as soon as the new short story collection comes out, we'll make sure everybody knows.
I can't wait. I'm
Thank
really
you.
excited to even work with those guys, that little group that we had.
It was a great group.
pretty
And when the
incredible.
book comes out, we're going to be super excited about it. So
Good.
thank you very much for coming out.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful night.
All right.